Welcome to Jolene's Books and Writers Talk, proudly sponsored by Southern Dragon Publishing, your partner in bold voices and compelling stories. Today, we're thrilled to welcome Seminole County's own Sarah Hendess to the show. Sarah is a romance author, historian, teacher, and a co-owner of a small press. Her award-winning debut, Second Chances in Hollywood, was followed by A Capital Christmas, a rich holiday romance set in 1859, Washington, D.C., inspired by the Smithsonian's first female librarian. Sarah writes with heart, history, and a sharp eye for detail, using everything from census records to 1856 street maps and weather almanacs. She's published through Wild Rose Press and is an advocate for responsible storytelling, inclusive tropes, and planning ahead for your literary legacy. You can learn more about her work on her website at sarahhendess.com and follow her on her various social media platforms such as Instagram, Facebook, and Blue Sky. Stay tuned. This conversation is full of wit, wisdom, and practical advice for romance writers and historical fiction
I'm Sarah,
fans.
and I am from Sanford, Florida. For my day job, I am a teacher. I'm an historian, and I also run a small publishing house with my sister. And it's amazing sometimes that I find time to write, but I do. And my first was Second Chances in Hollywood, which won the 2023 Florida Author Project Adult Fiction Prize. So I was very happy about that. And my latest baby that just came out is A Capital Christmas, and it released just back in November. It is a holiday romance that takes place in Washington, D.C. in 1859. The female main character is based on the first female librarian at the Smithsonian Institution.
Oh, nice. Let's see. The first thing I should ask is, are you participating or have you joined the Romance Writers of America?
Yes.
Okay. And are you a local member of any romance writers groups?
Not a local one. I am an online member of the Hearts Through History chapter through RWA.
Oh, okay. Hearts Through History. Let me check that out. The First Coast Romance Writers group started out as an RWA chapter, but they separated several years ago, and now they're a fully fledged nonprofit organization onto themselves in Jacksonville, and they serve everybody in Florida, kind of thing. They have online Zoom meetings as well as in the library. As a writer, you get 2 books?
I have 2 published books. There are many more in the hard drive that will never see the light of day.
And are you self-published or traditionally published?
I'm traditionally published through the Wild Rose Press.
Oh, I know them. I know several authors through them. You find them okay?
Yeah,
They're good service?
Good to me. Yeah, they have been.
Okay. And as a published author, probably international, you can call yourself internationally published, I'm sure. What advice would you give a new author that wants to get into the romance game?
Obviously, read as much romance as you can. Get really intimately familiar with the genre for sure. And join a writer's group as well, particularly one that is well geared toward romance. When I started out, the first writer's group I joined, they're wonderful. Don't get me wrong. I learned a lot from them, but they were very heavily thriller based. And so sometimes the feedback that I got would have been appropriate had I been writing a thriller, but wasn't the best advice sometimes for the romance genre. So find writers groups that are really familiar with your genre as well, and learn as much as you can from those people.
Okay. Is there any book festivals that you recommend to authors in Florida?
In Florida, I've not done
So you haven't been to the Amelia Island or is it the Coastal Magic one?
Yeah, I've heard of that. I haven't been to that one.
Okay. Do you use AI at all in your process?
The only time I've used AI for my process is when I've been stuck on a name for somebody. There have been a couple of times, and I haven't used it in either of these 2 books, but one that I'm working on now, I finally was just frustrated and asked ChatGPT, I said, give me a bunch of good names for a cowboy in California in this particular time period. And it spat out a bunch of names, none of which I used wholesale, but it pointed me in the right direction. But that's the extent of it. Because what I like to do is write. And I do like to edit, but I like to edit human things.
Okay, as a historical writer, do you have particular resources that you stick to or use more often than not?
I try to get into the primary sources as best I can. When I was working on A Capitol Christmas, which takes place in 1859 in Washington, D.C., I actually sent a lot of emails back and forth to archivists at the Smithsonian who were very excited to hear from me, by the way. Never be afraid to email the archivists at a museum and go, hey, I'm trying to find out more about X, Y, and Z. I also made some people over at the La Brea Tar Pits out in Los Angeles very happy as well. So don't be afraid to reach out because the primary sources are the best. They really are the best. I had a big 1856 street map of Washington, D.C. that was spread out across my dining room table for several months, but the primary sources are the best. And fortunately, thanks to the internet, you don't have to travel to this itty-bitty library in Nowheresville, USA to access these resources anymore, because if it's not already online, if you talk sweet to a librarian, they'll scan it for you and send it to you.
Yes, I found that to be true. Even in small towns in the UK, I was researching an author, and I emailed the librarian over there, and she was sweet. She made a copy and sent it to me.
And the small institutions in small places like that tend to be even more excited and more quickly responsive because they don't get asked as many questions because it's more specialized.
Well, that's true. And in the future, are you going to be upping up the century, or are you going to stick around the same time period?
My two books are exactly a century apart. Second Chances in Hollywood takes place in 1959. And Capitol Christmas takes place in 1859. The book I'm working on is part of my Hollywood series. That one's going to be 1948.
So close to that one.
Yeah, but I also have plans for one set in the mid-60s. I have plans for one set in the 1860s, early 1870s. I tend to bounce back and forth.
You're very versatile. That's good to know. And let's see. Have you used the familysearch.org to research the background in your characters, or do you just make everything up? Check the census records for the area and that sort of thing.
I have done that. Actually, I have checked some census records in the past for my books. I will say my stepfather is a professional genealogist. A lot of times I'll call him and be like, hey, Julian, can you look up? Yeah, I have a little ace up my sleeve there that I think a lot of authors don't have. But yeah, I will look up I have looked up census records. And even when you're talking more about the 20th century, even old phone books, is it newspapers.org or newspapers.com? Whichever of the two it is. It's either .org or .com, but I have a subscription to that too, because you can find out a lot of information from obituaries as well.
I love mine, even though it's considered somewhat expensive. I got a really good deal this time. I got 6 months for $45, I think, instead of $80. It was a special they were running. But yes, I love their newspapers.
Yeah.
They're not very good as far as getting the search algorithm that good. Sometimes you have to actually read through the newspaper if you can't find what you're looking for, but you know the date. So anyway.
And I tend to work with the date first. So, okay, here's what date I'm at. And I can search based by date and city. So that's good. Almanac.com is really good too because it has weather history on it.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, I can even make sure that the weather that my characters are experiencing on a particular day in my story is exactly what it would have been in that place and time.
Excellent resource. Yes, yes.
And this is the kind of micro-level stuff that I think most readers probably wouldn't check me on, but it matters to me, so I like to do it as realistically as I possibly can.
I do the same thing. I'm terrible about that. I take the characters from the census. I usually give them the same occupations, and I look up the newspapers and whatever I can find about that area, I usually try to incorporate it. It's a remembrance for me.
Yeah.
I've done the charts on most of my characters, and almost every one of them died out. The families died out. So
Yeah.
that's so sad. You had the chance. Is there any decade that you would like to visit in the past or the future?
As much as I love the 19th century, that was my focal point when I did my master's in history, was the 19th century United States. I also really like antibiotics and not getting tetanus. So I think I would skip the 19th century, but honestly, I would really love to go back to 1959 California and see what they called the second grand opening of Disneyland. Because it opened in 1955, but then in the summer of 59, they opened up a ton of new stuff like the Matterhorn, the monorail, a lot of what we think of as the classic rides when we think of Disneyland, California. I'm a Disney nerd. I would love to see that for sure. And if I could scoot by the Paramount Studios and watch them film an episode of Bonanza, that would just be chef's kiss.
We all have our priorities.
We do.
Is there anything you would tell a future romance writer not to do?
Don't force yourself to write outside your comfort level, particularly when it comes to spice. There are some writers who have no problems writing very explicit open door scenes, and other writers feel like they can't get into the genre because they're not comfortable doing that. But there's been a big surge, especially among Gen Z readers, for closed door, kissing only types of romances. So there really is something for everybody. Whether you're doing fade to black, open door, closed door, kissing only, whatever it is, there's space in the genre for everybody. So don't let anybody tell you that you can't be part of this simply because you're not willing to write 50 Shades of Grey or whatever it was called.
Yep. Okay. And the tropes, the romance trope seems to be more variety or more talked about than mysteries or any of the other kind of genres. Last time I looked, it was like 40 or 50 of them, different tropes that you could write about. Is that about right?
Probably. You can even make your own up, depending on what themes you pull out of a book.
Okay, so as a new person learning the romance genre, what would you define as a trope?
It's like an entry point, a hinge that a lot of your story can hang off of. Whether that's your characters are enemies to lovers, friends to lovers, it could be a second chance romance. It does set the reader up a little bit then to know what to expect going forward into the book. And romance readers especially tend to like that. Everybody has the things that they like. I write a lot of like enemies to lovers. I will never use the miscommunication trope in my stories because to me that just feels too much like lying, and that doesn't sit well with me. And I don't do any falsehoods at all because that's a huge red flag in a relationship. But it gives the reader kind of a jumping off point to know what to expect out of the book, or at least the general direction the book is going to go. And that's when you're talking about romance readers, a lot of us who are comfort readers, it's good to have that kind of sense of security going into it, that you have an idea of what to expect.
Okay, so you would suggest that they include that in their description and perhaps on the back of the book?
The book blurb, or at least make it clear. You don't necessarily have to say this is an enemies to lovers tale. You could just say they have a rocky start, can they overcome it, sort of thing in your book blurb. And of course your keywords then when you're advertising it, when you're putting it on Amazon, when you're picking your hashtags for social media, that's a really good place to use those keywords for those tropes.
Okay. And well, you're traditionally published, so I can't ask you that. A lot of the questions center around publishing. Which one do you prefer? But yours is taken care of.
The self-publishing as well, because I was having trouble finding a home for second chances in Hollywood because taking place in 1959, according to RWA, it's not an historical romance because they say World War II and earlier is what historical is to them. But it's certainly not contemporary. One of my characters had never seen a dishwasher before, right? It was certainly not contemporary. So I got some interest from some bigger houses, but they ultimately passed on the book because they didn't know how to position it in the market.
Ah,
So self-publishing was a path that I looked for because I knew it was a good book. I knew I had a good book. And unfortunately, it really often does come down to whether the publisher or the agent feels that they can sell it. I was glad ultimately to find a traditional publisher because honestly, the idea of having to cobble together like a graphic artist to do my cover art and hiring my own editor and proofreader, and I'm not good at any of the visually aesthetic stuff like formatting and things like that. To have to deal with all those moving pieces myself was overwhelming for me personally. I know a lot of authors who absolutely love it. They love having that control. It was just overwhelming to me. I would have done it to get my book out there, but I think it comes down to what are you more comfortable with? Personally, I was comfortable giving up some control so that I didn't have to do all those overwhelming steps.
is there anything that you would like to tell readers about your books, the one that you're working on now that you're hoping to get?
Yeah, I'm real close. I'm like maybe 2, 3 chapters from the end of the first draft, so it's very exciting. But finishing a book is even more exciting because it means that you've survived the endless middle. But it's unexpectedly timely. It deals a lot with book banning and censorship that was happening across the country in the late 1940s, immediately post World War II. It deals with the Hollywood blacklist and these ideas of like thought police. So it has become unexpectedly timely as I've been working on it, especially as an historian in the state of Florida. You're just sitting there going, oh, goodness me. But I'm really excited about it because it gets a little bit back further closer to that like golden age of Hollywood. So that's been a lot of fun to write about as well. And my characters are not, my Hollywood actors are not like A-list actors. They're what we would call working actors under contract by the studio and getting these secondary roles in films and things like that. So that's been an interesting aspect of it to explore as well.
So you're researching how they get paid and their unions that they have to be a part of and that sort of stuff. Very cool. And I'm getting back to the time period where it's considered historical. If, according to most definitions, historical or antique is 70 years or more.
When you're
So
talking about, yeah.
1959 to me is historical. And
Yeah.
if it happens before I was born, it's historical. We were arguing about that last year. We were discussing that for the NERFA contest to put on historical. I said, you might as well up it at least to 1960.
Yeah.
Because most anybody who was born 20 or 30 years before that have already passed.
Yeah, like I said, RWA says historical is World War II and earlier. I highly disagree with that. Don't come at me telling me 1946 is contemporary. Vietnam hadn't even happened, not to say nothing of the microchip. This is not the same world it was 80 years ago by any stretch of the imagination. I've heard other arguments that say it depends on whether the author had to come at it from a purely research point of view or if they were able to write off lived experience. If my mom wrote a book that took place in the 1970s, it wouldn't be historical, but if I wrote a book that took place in the 70s, it would be. I think that's entirely too much context for people to expect readers to know. Are they going to look up the birth date of every single author? No, don't do that. That's creepy. The Historical Novel Society, which I've been a part of for a very long time, they say 50 years in the past or more. And that is like a hard stop. So like yesterday, we just crossed over to 1975 being considered part of historical when we talk about fiction.
Okay. So the National Historical Society, that's the one in England?
The Historical Novel Society, yeah, they're based out of England, but they have chapters all over the world. And I actually review books for them as well.
Okay. I joined them, so I get a newsletter, so I know them.
If you go back, hey, if you go into their website and you search my name, you'll find the reviews they've done of my 2 books. I got a really nice review from them for a Capital Christmas. I was absolutely thrilled.
All right, last question. You're a fairly young woman, so you don't have to really think about this for now, but for the future. A lot of writers get into writing later in life because they're retired, they have more time, they're more experienced, whatever. But what I found is they do not make allowances for what's going to happen to their copyrights. Because if you read the copyright certificate, when you get it from the Copyright Office, it's inheritable. It's considered an asset. And if you do not give it to somebody in your will or put it in a family trust, a lot of fraud happens. And that's happened to a lot of authors. Barbara Comfort was an artist in Vermont, and she started writing mysteries at 65. Half of them she published. I think she published most of them by herself. She created a publishing company, and she was a New Yorker, and she lived in Vermont, whatever. She was single her whole life, and she didn't have any children. She had some nieces and nephews, but her books are in limbo, so nobody can do anything about them. She didn't have an agent or anything like that. So do you have a plan, or have you thought about making a plan for your books? Wild Rose Press is supposed to be copywriting your books for you.
Yeah, I do actually. I'm a Quaker, and we are all about having end-of-life plans.
Oh, okay, good.
For us, so we actually have everything in our will set up. So if something happens to me, everything is in a trust for our son. So
Okay.
he'll inherit the copyrights as well.
Oh, nice. Excellent. I'm glad to find the first author who's taking care of business.
And my uncle, the author, is also a lawyer, and so these are questions that come up just regularly on phone calls.
Okay. You should get him to write an article for your blog.
I should start a blog.
Yeah. What I would suggest for you is to go into Substack.com and start your blog there, because it has a built-in audience already, and you gain followers more quickly. And they have a lot of nice free stuff to start off with. And eventually, if you get a lot of people, you can have a paid newsletter and a free newsletter and start earning a little bit of money that way. That doesn't have anything to do with Wild Rose Press. That's all for you.
It's true.
Okay. So if you do, find me on there and I'll follow you.
Okay.
Thank you so much for participating.
An interesting interview. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. We hope you will like, subscribe, comment, and share our post with your social media and your friends and family. If you're an author or anyone else in the book business and would like to be part of our podcast, we would love to have you. Check out the website, southerndragonpublishing.com, and there's a tab for the podcast. Check it out. We'll see you next time.